right now on Higher Journeys Radio with Alexis Brooks. Lately, I've been having discussions with some individuals who still insist on separating the ET UFO phenomenon from other paranormal encounters and maintaining that the subjects and thus the experiences are worlds apart. However, there is another school of thought, and one that our guest, Rey Hernandez, co-founder of FREE, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences, fully supports. He insists that all phenomena are inextricably linked, including those we have with non-human intelligence. Further, what he refers to as the contact modalities are tightly woven together by one common thread, and that's consciousness. We had Rey back on the show to discuss how he arrived at this conclusion and why now, more than ever, we need to look very closely at the totality of this phenomena and, moreover, how it may all link back to our contact with non-human intelligence. It is always a delight to have my friend and colleague Rey Hernandez, co-founder of FREE, on our show. But today I'm particularly excited to have Rey back on to discuss a book that he co-authored and edited, and one that I am so excited to say has been consistently on the Amazon bestseller list since its debut, and that's Beyond UFOs, The Science and Consciousness of Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And I've got to say that as of this recording, I just checked the Amazon stats, Beyond UFOs is number 11 on the bestseller list in the category of UFOs. Let me ask you, Rey, did you expect that this book would have received such wide acclaim in such a short period of time?
No, I didn't, Alexis. I had no idea it would be selling so well.
I've been keeping you up to date, and I'm like, Rey, you got to check these stats so you can have your bragging rights. Seriously, though, and I know you're humbled by it, but this is really a testament to this stellar work that you did, along with your partners of FREE. And let me just remind everyone, FREE stands for, and get ready for this one, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters. Why did you add the other E? The other extraordinary.
Well, what it was is that these experiences are not just physical.
That's right.
The ET aspect is a very, very minuscule aspect of this phenomenon. And really the most important part is the extraordinary experiences. Mm-hmm. That's really the most important part of these of this phenomenon.
Okay.
So it's like Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée and John Mack have said, it's both a physical and a non-physical experience.
Absolutely.
And that's why we had to change the name.
There you go. So you're going to add the extra E to the FREE, so it's going to be FREE.
Correct. We'll do the Spanish version of it.
There you go. Perfect. Well, listen, this book, which of course we're going to be discussing today, is by no means a short read, people. We're talking close to 800 pages, 3.5 pounds. We went and checked the weight. This is like, you can get your workout in and read at the same time. But we're talking about, Rey, some extraordinary revealing data. We're talking about firsthand accounts and evidence like nothing I've ever seen that this phenomenon that we call the UFO ET phenomenon is real, is happening to many people around the planet, and is connected to many other modalities that we'll broadly call paranormal. And Rey is going to be elaborating a great deal more on this part of the book. But before we get into that, Rey, how long did it take you to put this, what I'm going to call an encyclopedia-sized book together? How long did this take?
Actually, it was fairly quickly. It started, I woke up on a Saturday morning, and I had the entire book in my mind with all the chapters and who will be writing the various chapters. And so I immediately wrote it down, the whole summary of it, and I sent it off to Mary Rodwell and Rudy Shields, two of our surviving co-founders, and they absolutely loved it, and they gave me the green light. And so then I started calling all of these individuals, and everyone accepted. The only aspect we didn't have was I knew that whoever was going to be writing the conclusion had to be a super heavyweight, but I didn't have a name in mind. And about a week later, the name of Brad Steiger came to me.
Yeah.
And Brad wrote the conclusion on his deathbed. He was in hospice.
Wow. I know we lost him, I think, in May. Yes?
Yes, he died within a week after finishing our article, and his wife Sherry and I have had frequent email communications, and she's told me so much about how important writing that conclusion was for him, because he saw our work really as a new paradigm in this field, that this wasn't just straight material ufology, pure ET type of aspects that you see in the mainstream, or abduction issues. This is something so much more complicated. And Brad knew that because he had been researching this phenomenon for over almost 50 years.
That's right. That's right. That is really something to mark the end of an incredible journey for him. I can't help but think that there was something in the stars with that last act. Although I doubt it's his last act, I'm sure he's still quite active. I wrote a little bit of a tribute when we first got word of his passing, that he is definitely someone with that amount of curiosity and doggedness and trying to discover this mystery or explore the mystery. I doubt the mystery is going to go unexplored just because he's on the other side. He's probably like, oh, now I can see a little bit more, hopefully. Well, that's something that's really something. I have to comment on this aspect. I've heard this said before, that people in getting sort of a download about writing a book, or even maybe it's a screenplay, and all of the elements come in almost like a download. All the chapters, the people, in your case, the people that you would bring to put all of this together. Do you feel that's what happened to you?
It was a download when I was asleep, because it was very detailed. It had all the chapters, the thematic topics of the chapter, the co-authors. It was all there. And then it took me like 2 hours to write out all the detail, the summary, that Saturday morning. And actually, that's how 4 or 5 years earlier, how the Experiential Research Study got started as well. I woke up again on a Saturday morning. My family was not home, my wife and daughter. And all of a sudden, I wrote everything on the detail of what this study would be doing. It's just... you have to be very selective who you tell these stories to.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah, because it's truly unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. Unbelievable, but well, there's more to that in terms of belief versus knowing. You don't need to believe when you know this is what happened.
Exactly, because you experience it.
That's right. There you go. Well, I have to tell you, in this book, we've got some very credible, academically and scientifically rooted individuals who contributed to this amazing volume. There are also some terms, Ray, that some people interested in this subject may or may not be familiar with, like the term UAP, which stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, as opposed to the more traditional term UFO. Let me ask you, why did you decide, vehemently I might add, to use the term UAP throughout this book instead of UFO?
Because when you think of the word UFO, you think of a flying saucer. And the vast majority of the times that when individuals are seeing these types of objects, the last thing they see is an actual flying saucer or an actual physical craft. What they're seeing is a whole cornucopia of different shapes, sizes, colors, shape-shifting, appearing, disappearing type of objects in the sky. And so the more appropriate term for this is unidentified aerial phenomena. Like in my case, I saw like plasma streaks of light that formed the whole shell of 3 different like Goodyear blimps, and inside was all this white plasma energy swirling around. And then when I had communications with this craft and my friends next to me, we're trying to explain this away. In my head, I told whatever that object, whatever the intelligence was in there, I said, you better come up with some better stuff than this, because my friends don't believe you. And all of a sudden, what we were all watching, totally stopped, and they were replaced by thousands of stars that were like 10 times the size of Venus, blinking on and off. And then by certain sections, they were powering up and powering down. So this is not a UFO. Okay, This is something so much more complicated. So that's why we use that term.
And yet, if I'm not mistaken, the term UAP was sort of put out into the public domain by by the Pentagon, I believe. Yes, particularly when that now famous December 17th of last year New York Times article. I believe that's the term that they used. Right.
It's that's the term that they used, but it's been a term that Jacques Vallée has used, over 30 years ago. I don't really understand don't know who exactly coined it, but it's been a term that's been around, at least in the more academic discussions of this phenomenon for many, many years.
Interesting. As I'm listening to you, I'm wondering if one day we will replace unidentified with identified. Flying up. Identified aerial. We've now identified the aerial phenomena, of which there are many, myriad, I'm sure. Well, listen, as I mentioned to you folks out there, I'm looking at this 3.5-pound encyclopedic volume. And by the way, this is volume 1. We'll talk a little bit about volume 2, which is en route. But because there's so much, Ray, and there's so much to chew on, I went through and I wanted to focus our discussion on several chapters that initially stood out for me. These are themes that I think our audience will really benefit from hearing your thoughts on. So let's get into that. The late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was obviously integral in starting the Free Organization, authored 2 chapters in this book, or I should say, obviously had since passed, but you procured 2 very compelling pieces of work to put in the book from him, called From Outer Space to Inner Space and Nature's Mind, the Quantum Hologram. So let's talk about those 2 chapters for a bit and why those areas, the quantum hologram perspective, as well as this idea of inner space, were so important to include in this book.
Okay, as a background, Dr. Edgar Mitchell was a genius. A lot of people didn't know that. You had to know him personally and to look at his journey. He had a profound samadhi experience out in space, which can be described sort of as an out-of-body experience where he had received download information that we're all unified, that we're all one, that there's no separation. And it was a knowing, just like we were talking about before. So it's one of these profound consciousness-altering type of experiences. And when he returned back to Earth, he had a journey to find out what happened to him out in space. And he eventually found out that in the Eastern mystical tradition and a lot of the Vedic writings, there were descriptions of these samadhi experiences where you receive this download information of all knowing. And so he then began to search what is this consciousness altering type of experience. He previously had an interest in the psychic phenomenon. He had been a student of J.B. Rhine, not at Duke University, but in terms of his writings. And he actually conducted experiment in space using Rhine's cards. ESP cards. I forgot there's a formal name for them, and I won't go into those details. But he actually brought these cards up to space, and at a certain time frame, he conducted this with 6 individuals on Earth. And lo and behold, when they returned and they crunched out the numbers, the findings that were statistically significant, that ESP actually also can occur in space at a distance of hundreds of thousands of miles. So he's always had this interest. And then in the early 1970s, Edgar was at the Stanford Research Institute, and he's one of the key people that brought in funding to be able to study remote viewing. with Russell Targan and Hal Puthoff. So he was one of the key people. He was the one that brought in Uri Geller.
Did he
The
really?
first, yes, he was the very
Wow.
first person. Yes, and so what happened was about a year later, he founded on paper the Institute for Noetic Sciences. And then eventually they got funding for it. And they established a physical space in Petaluma, California. And now they have, goodness, at least 10 uh, PhD scientists that work out of the Institute for Noetic Sciences studying the topic of consciousness, of ESP, parapsychology, energy healing, mystical meditation, remote viewing, all of these types of topics. And the lead scientist there, Dr. Dean Radin, is one of the advisors for Free. And we interviewed him a few weeks ago out there in California when we were there for the Parapsychology Association annual conference, where we also happened to meet Dr. Jacques Vallée as well.
Oh, wonderful.
And he gave glowing endorsements for Free. This is Dean Radin. And so Edgar founded this institute, and in the year 1972, which is the same year that he founded IONS, he got together some of the few people at that time that were working in what is now known as parapsychology. This is the whole field of ESP, precognition, and it was in the U.S. it was still at an infant stage, and then also a thick book was put out. He edited a book that was about 600 pages on that field. And that article, which is the introductory article that you had just mentioned, Inner Space and Outer Space, is a attempt to be able to give a broad overview to the field of now what we now know as parapsychology, and at that time was known as the psi phenomenon. And then eventually, later on, over time, Edgar became one of the fathers of the modern UFO UAP disclosure movement, and one of the few astronauts that publicly informed the world that yes, these objects are very real, and humanity needs to be informed about it. And then later on, he formed Free, the Free organization. So here is a man that is exploring both the field of parapsychology, but he also formed a group called Quantrek. Quantrek was a group of PhD physicists from all around the world, and what they were developing was a theory of consciousness that linked the human brain with the external cosmology of the information fields of our universe, and how we interact with the intelligence of the universe, which in turn leads to the whole aspects of the paranormal. Because he believed that all of the paranormal phenomenon, including all of the paranormal contact phenomenon, such as out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, remote viewing, channeling, etc., 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 is all one phenomenon. And so he was searching for, as I said, the golden rule for the unified theory of consciousness and the paranormal. And what he wrote was, again, in the early 90s, he began to write articles on this topic, and the first article was Nature's Mind, the Quantum Hologram. And then later on, 3 years later, he began writing a series of extended articles, much more scientific articles, on which eventually came to be known as his theory, the quantum hologram theory of consciousness, and which is a physics theory of what might be the true nature of our reality and how we as humans interact with the information fields of our reality.
That obviously is gaining more and more attention. Obviously, the whole idea of a theoretical model or quantum physics model of the universe, but when you bring in the holographic aspects, it's just really mind-blowing, forgive the pun. But
Yes.
It makes me think of the William Blake quote, "The universe is in a grain of sand." Well, the universe is within within, literally, and we're inextricably linked to it. So it's amazing, amazing.
That actually, one of Edgar's favorite quotes is that he would always remind me. He would say, "Ray, we know the equivalent of one grain of sand
Mm,
in an entire beach." And the first time he ever told me, I then responded. I said, "And that's just one beach,"
that's just one beach.
and basically to imply that we live in a multiverse.
Certainly.
So if we know almost nothing about one beach, let alone an almost infinite number of beaches. So
Imagine.
in other words, we know almost nothing about, our reality.
Yeah. When trying to grasp the infinitude of all things, I guess, something made me think of that William Blake quote. It's funny how
That
we
was
use the grain of sand analogy, but I thought to myself the other day, if the universe is in a grain of sand, and there's many grains of sand on one beach, imagine the number of universes, if
yes.
that's true.
Well,
Oh,
As a side note, Rudy told me that most of the PhD physicists in the United States, once they go out to the real world as PhD physicists, almost all of them are adherents to a multiverse theory.
hmm,
So just think about it. Here you have, PhD physicists who people consider the world's most intelligent individuals in the world, okay, geniuses, all of them believing that we live in more than one reality. But yet the normal human walking on planet Earth has no idea of this.
right. And we're talking about the even the traditional materialist physicists now. I mean, across the
Yes,
board.
yes, yes, correct, correct. Rudy has told me that. So, for example, string theory, Dr. Mitchell,
Yeah.
always on TV, radio shows, Nova, et cetera, et cetera. He's an adherent to string theory, and
Hmm.
they believe that there are either 11 or 12 dimensions.
Right. That I've heard. When do you think this I would call it a paradigm shift within academia changed, and when and what was the trigger? You think?
Well, I'm not a physicist, but I've been taught a lot by Edgar and Rudy, and I know that one of the first PhD academics, a very famous physicist, Hugh Everett,
Yes, of
uh,
course.
came about with the many worlds theories,
Right.
and then from that, then numerous other tangential theories have come out over the years. The most recent one is, besides string theory, is that we might live in a simulated
Simulation. Yeah.
simulation,
That's right.
and there's literally tons of these theories. For example, there's a professor of astrophysics at Columbia University. He's the chair of that department. Godleb, oh goodness, I always mispronounce his last name. Well, he came out with an article 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that argues that non-human intelligence might actually be embedded in the very fabric of our reality. Okay,
Hmm.
and that's very similar to, written in a different way, Edgar's and Rudy's theory of the quantum hologram theory of consciousness, that our universe is intelligent. And so here you are from Columbia University writing an article that within dark matter, the fabric of our reality, that's where intelligence might lie. You know, so
That's
these are
heavy
profound
stuff.
theories.
Really,
Yeah,
really, yeah. We
yeah.
could certainly do a show on that alone because that is really a paradigm buster. But I'm looking at the clock and we've got some more heavy stuff to cover. So
Okay.
let's get to. Thank you. That was a great summation, by the way. Two other areas that are covered in this book also captured my attention, Ray. And that's one that was written by Dr. Joseph Burks, MD. He contributed the chapter entitled Medical Healings Reported by UAP Contact Experiencers. So I want to talk about that a little bit, but also I'd like to bring in Reverend Michael Carter and Norman Merberg's contribution. They co-wrote an article which is called The Spiritual Transformation of the UAP Contact Experiencer. So let's start with the first one. I think this is really intriguing, and I have heard accounts of this before. People that are miraculously healed, including your Nana, by the way, it's not a person but a dog, but still medical miraculous healings reported by experiencers. Let's tackle that for a bit.
Well, this topic came up because that was my first experience. It was an
Yes.
energy being that healed our dog, our 15-year-old dog, who we were going to be euthanizing that same day. And that morning, this energy being appeared in our living room. My wife disappeared in front of me with the dog. It put me to sleep. And then 45 minutes later, my wife was dancing in the middle of the living room, that the angels cured her. The angels cured her, and our dog was running around the whole living room. Now, initially, I didn't know that this was UAP or UFO related until I thought it was paranormal experience. Until 2 months later, my wife saw a huge, gigantic UAP outside our house. And then I knew that whatever happened in our living room was somehow associated with this non-human intelligence associated with a UAP. And then she began to see tons of these quote-unquote objects, these UFOs, these UAPs as well. And then I began to see these objects. So I knew that this was a valid phenomenon. And then when I went to the internet, I would, Google, UFO and medical healings, and the name of Preston Dennett came up. And Preston is also a co-author with Dr. Joseph Burks of our article. We then asked in our research study, have you ever been medically healed, either you or a family member, by UFO-related non-human intelligence? And the results that we got totally blew everybody in our board away. 50% of the individuals, half of the people that took our survey, stated that either they or a member of their families have had a UFO-related medical healing. And then for our chapter, obviously, we had to write a chapter on that. So I asked Preston Dennett, who had written a book 20 years ago titled UFO Healings. And that book was not sold, was not widely publicized, it did not sell much, but it had over 200 cases of UFO healings. And so I brought in my good friend, Dr. Joseph Burks, who's a retired medical doctor, that would be able to investigate some of our cases and actually review some of the medical records, obviously with the permission of the experiencers. So he and Preston identified 10 cases. They requested the permission of the person to do a write-up. One person was a medical doctor. He requested to be anonymous, but he was aboard a UFO craft with these little grays, and they healed him from a life-threatening illness, disease, and no, I mean, it's unbelievable, the stories that are there, and the credibility of the people. Many of them were professionals that were in that chapter. And again, we wanted the audience to know that this is a very valid phenomenon, that half of the people that have had these contact experiences stated that they've been medically healed by non-human intelligence, almost double the amount of people that have had abductions.
That is amazing. I have to interject this. This is, again, I've heard this a number of times through several sources, and yet, again, never cease to be amazed. And I can just kind of hear or feel the audience out there listening going, okay, well, if that's so, then why can't we summon this on demand? All of the individuals who are not healed by any means, not the least of which is from non-human intelligence. What do you think, for those individuals that are healed, what are the NHIs trying to show the world, if anything? There's something there, it seems.
Well, let me just state that at least in 3 of the 10 cases, these individuals publicly called for this intelligence to heal them. Okay. One of the cases was my wife with our dog. She started to pray. Okay, pray to God that our angels and God come and intervene, and they did. Her angels did show up. Reverend Michael Carter, who's an ordained minister, okay, he began to pray to God because he had a leg that was twice the size of the other. He had a blood clot, so he had so much pain after he released from the hospital that he began to pray, to God for please help, I'm in so much pain. Boom. This human-looking, quote-unquote, Palladian type of being showed up right in front of him, opened up his hand, and this orb came out. The orb went into his body, and he started quivering and shaking for about a minute. The being disappeared right in front of him, and after that minute of quivering and shaking, he looked, and his leg was normal with no pain. Okay, this other woman, Alina, who lives here in Miami. As a matter of fact, she had a toe that was infected. It was like super large, all red, and she was having a lot of pain. And then this orb, again, another orb, appeared to her, comes like right at her face, like, here, look at me. This is what I am. And then went inside her. And then she started quivering and shaking. And when she woke up, her leg was normal. So, and then there was another man, O'Connor. Goodness, I apologize, I forgot his name, but he actually has a video of an orb going into his body, and this man had cancer. Okay, was totally cured of cancer, and he has the actual video. I've seen that video. So for many of these cases, it starts with a calling. Yeah. Obviously, all of humanity, they don't have those gifts, but for certain individuals that have this history of relationship with this non-human intelligence, that's how a lot of the healings took place. And again, it's a mystery. It's a mystery, Alexis. We don't have any answers to what's going on. Only thing we can do is document it.
I think we're so hungry to replicate, and again, all of us, me included, how can this be matriculated throughout society so everyone has the benefit of this? But then it begs the question. You just said there are some individuals that perhaps have a proclivity to call these beings in. Perhaps there's just a message in the measure of conviction as they're making this request. I mean, I'm reminded of the famous biblical quote, "Ask and it shall be given to you; knock and the door will be opened."
Yeah.
Seek and you shall find, but with the caveat of complete conviction and knowing that you are healed. I don't know. That's a very interesting thing we could debate forever. But
let me give you a parallel to this. That's all the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people all over the world that are now starting to do CE. I call it human initiated contact experiences, HICE, HICE. I don't like to use the term CE5. So there are literally thousands and thousands of people all over the world that are going out, even outside their backyards, and they're consciously calling down to see non-human intelligence. And a good many of the times they appear. Mike Marburg, who we're going to be transitioned now to the spiritual chapter, is one of these individuals. He is a good friend of Costas Macreus and Hollis Polk. They have an organization called ET Let's Talk, which is promoting human-initiated contact experiences all over the world. They have 17,000 members now all over the world. And he has had some remarkable experiences. And I had a remarkable experience with him several months ago when I went up to Tampa, Florida, which is another side story. It was a huge school bus, twice the size of a school bus object, came right at us. It was a white, silver colored, and did like a 45-degree angle. This is like 100 meters above us. It was very, very close, with no noise, just a low humming sound. Didn't have any wings. And he said that's just in the top. That's number 10 of the experience that he's had. But this is happening all over the world. And again, it's a calling. Here you are. You're praying. You're meditating to be able to interact with non-human intelligence. And just like in my case, when I called down that object that appeared, in 15 minutes it showed up. So it's the same thing. It's a calling. You have to be pure. You have to have the proper intent.
Absolutely.
And,
yes.
And they do show up for a good many people.
Let's make note of this, everyone. HICE, human-initiated contact experiences, correct?
Correct.
Is
HIC, HICE.
HICE. Is this something that you would encourage those with the proper intent to the extent that they can proactively do? I mean, I asked that question just with this little bit of, not trepidation on my part, but you hear particularly those that come from a particular belief system that, don't channel, and be careful about who you call in. You may call in the wrong person, the wrong entity. What's the position you take on how people should go after heists or become involved with heists?
Yeah. First of all, the term was coined by Dr. Joseph Burks, who has called down uh, many experiences over his years. He's in his early 70s. And I would encourage everyone to go to the website ET Let's Talk by Hollis and Costas Macraeus, Hollis Polk and Costas Macraeus. And there you could network with other people that have also been doing this for many, many, many years. They're sharing stories, they're sharing videos. It's a network for people that that are doing this type of work. And in terms of, I've never met anyone that's had a negative experience from these types of experiences. I'm also very good friends with Sixto Paz, with Ricardo Gonzalez. Sixto Paz was one of the individuals that started Grupo Rama in Peru. Giorgio Piacenza was a member of our board. He and his uncle were going out to the desert at the very same time that Sixto Paz and his brother were getting the same downloads. This is in the same neighborhood in Peru. So Giorgio has been doing this again for many, many years, since the mid-'70s. And here in Miami, there's a very large group of folks from Grupo Rama that have been involved with that organization for more than 30 years. And speaking with hundreds of these people from both the U.S. and around the world, and with Grupo Rama, I've never met one individual describe a negative experience of calling down non-human intelligence.
What is the difference? You briefly mentioned CE5, and that's a term that I've only recently become, maybe in the last year or so, familiar with. I believe this is something that was sort of coined by Stephen Greer. What's the difference between HEIS and CE5, if anything?
Well, the CE5 protocols, quote unquote, they were basically confiscated from Sixto Paz. He had developed certain protocols to be able to interact with non-human intelligence and to call these objects down. And I don't want to get into these discussions of Mr. Greer, but basically my position and the position of thousands of people all over the world is they're trying to stay away from Mr. Greer. He's done great work in the past, but in terms of for many, many, many reasons, including Dr. Joseph Burks, Costa Agrias, they all started with Stephen Greer, and so many other individuals. They've kept a distance from this man, and so to be able to use his term, the term that he coined, for commercial reasons. For example, he was charging $3,500 to go out to a desert for 3 days to call down a craft, and all they got were bites from sand bugs. But yet here you have Ricardo Gonzalez charging $150 for 3 days, and that includes food and camping and going to the bathroom type of needs in Mount Shasta. You could clearly see the difference between these two individuals. One is for material wealth and material gain, and the other one is to promote consciousness.
Yeah. Well, I will say this about that. Yeah, we kind of moved into a little bit of a controversial area, and I would like to say, just for the record, since Mr. Greer is not here to defend himself, we're going to try to leave it as neutral as we can. But duly noted. In any case, the bottom line is it seems that there is a process that can be procured for individuals, and as a matter of fact, I've gotten some messages and emails from individuals asking me, as if I know the answer, I'd like to be in contact with non-human intelligence. Can you tell me how? Well, I hope you're listening, because there is a process, several, I'm sure, that can be used to help with the proper intent. So that's quite interesting. We're gonna have some links associated with what we just talked about at everyone. So check out higherjourneys.com for that. Now let's get into this, Ray. This is what I've really been looking forward to. Right at the start of the book, in fact, in its preface, it's stated, and I'm going to quote here, it says, "Free's focus is to explore the question, quite simply, what is consciousness and how is consciousness interrelated with non-human intelligence?" Now, this is where I'd like you to take the helm. I want you to take your time and explore these very two very important questions with our audience. Let me repeat. What is consciousness, and how is consciousness interrelated with non-human intelligence? This, to me, is probably the most important aspect of this complex and revelational phenomenon. And that's what you've consistently called, is a part of all of this, contact modalities that kind of maybe help to bring those questions to light. So we're talking about exploring what consciousness is, how consciousness is interrelated with NHI, and how what you call contact modalities, which is the interrelationship of all paranormal experiences, including, of course, contact with non-human intelligence, how that all melds together. So I want you to give yourself some time. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I want you to take a good 15 or so minutes to get into your thoughts on all of this. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay, you're on, man. Let's hear it.
All right. Thank you. First of all, this whole topic, I was introduced to it when I had an out-of-body experience while I was driving to work at 8:30 in the morning in the middle of a traffic jam. All of a sudden, I was taken out of my body. I was brought to what I call a matrix reality, where I was pure mind. I was pure thought. There was nothing around me. I was in a nothingness. And then I appeared to be inside a huge, gigantic spinning wheel. And inside the spinning wheel, there appeared to be like spokes. And inside the different components of the spokes were what I now call the contact modalities. In one section were UFO-related contact experiences. Another one was near-death experiences. Another one was out-of-body experiences. Another one was remote viewing. Another one was channeling. Another one was communication with ghosts and spirits. And another one was telepathic communications, ESP. Another one was hallucinogenic shamanic journeys. Another one was mystical meditation. People are meditating, all of a sudden, they pop out. So all of these are experiences where humans are piercing the veil and having contact with non-human intelligence. I was shown this not via a voice. It was like downloads inside my mind, where I visually saw these different, what I now call contact modalities. And what I was, the information that was given to me was that humans are viewing all of these different ways that they're piercing the veil and communicating with them as separate and distinct phenomenon. But in actuality, it's one phenomenon. And that the glue, the key to be able to understand how it's all one phenomenon, humans are calling it consciousness. But in reality, it's the very fabric of our reality. And then I was told, you have to inform humanity of the relationship between us, the spirit world, and consciousness. And then there's two keys. This is not about you making, tons of money and getting rich. And the people that you're going to be needing to assist you have to be individuals with minimal ego. And then poof, I was right back in my car, driving in the middle of a traffic jam, like freaking out what the hell just happened to me. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Mary Rodwell, and she said, "Dear Ray, I'm sorry that I'm responding to an email that you had sent me 6 months ago, but it just popped up on my computer today." I then responded to her, and we had a very lengthy Skype call. The very next day at 9:30 in the morning, I received a phone call from Dr. Rudy Shields, who is now the director of FREE and one of our co-founders, at 9:30 in the morning. And Rudy is an emeritus professor of astrophysics from Harvard University. I didn't know that Mary had sent him an email. He then asked permission to talk to me and to explain to him what had happened to me. He then explained to me that I was given the information of the quantum hologram theory of consciousness, of how it works in a visual display. Because he said everything that I was told, the information that I was given, is exactly the quantum hologram theory of consciousness. And then he went on to explain the science and the physics of it and how it works. Towards the end of the conversation, he gave me the telephone number of Edgar Mitchell, and he said that Edgar lives a short distance from me, and encouraged me to call him because Edgar was the one that actually invented this theory. I then gave a call later on to Edgar that afternoon, and he invited me to his home the very next day. I was there 6 hours. He then, after I explained to him what had happened to me, he then got into the nuts and bolts, the details of the quantum hologram theory of consciousness, which is exactly the information I was given. And it was at the home of Edgar Mitchell that the free organization got started. And we agreed to incorporate Edgar, Rudy, and Mary, and myself to lead this charge of implement what this non-human intelligence had instructed me to do. Now, the contact modalities. Okay. In the last 5 years that I've been doing this work, I've had the opportunity to talk with many scientists and many researchers and academics in the field of parapsychology. Parapsychology, as I mentioned earlier, in the field of psychic research. Most of these individuals privately have a hypothesis that all of what I now call the contact modalities are indeed interrelated. But very few of them actually talk about this publicly. As I said earlier, we just interviewed Dr. Dean Radin. He also believes that all of these paranormal contact phenomenon are all interrelated, that they're not separate. And he also has a hypothesis that consciousness, which is how we interact with the very fabric of our reality, is the key to understand it. Now, Dean should know, because he's probably the world's leading academic theoretician on consciousness, and also on the paranormal. He's written 3 books on consciousness. So just Google in or go to Amazon and type Dr. Dean Radin, R-A-D-I-N, and you'll see several of his important works. And so Edgar Mitchell and Rudy Shields, unlike most of the individuals in the field of parapsychology, have publicly stated that all of these, what I call the paranormal contact modalities, are interrelated. For many years, they've discussed this. So what we wanted to do in terms of the research of our organization, we believe that the long-term objective for research is to be able to do very comprehensive, detailed academic studies of the different contact modalities, and then begin to do a cross-comparative studies between these different contact modalities. Now, for near-death experiences, there are many medical doctors and academics that have been doing these research studies on near-death experiences. For out-of-body experiences, there have been some research in that area. For hallucinogenic journeys, we're just now starting to do this type of work. Dr. Rick Strassman was one of the first to do a research study on DMT. In terms of remote viewing, the folks at the Stanford Research Institute, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, were the first to put out research papers on remote viewing. But it never really continued outside of these 2 individuals at an academic research level. And in terms of the UFO contact phenomenon, there was almost nothing that has been, no research study on this phenomenon. There were small studies of 50 individuals asking 50 questions, very, very limited studies. But in terms of any type of comprehensive academic research on this phenomenon, it had never been done. Our book, Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence, is the result of 5 years from the world's first academic comprehensive academic research study on individuals that have both seen these UAPs and have had contact with non-human intelligence. So eventually, what needs to be done is we need to be able to secure major funding. So major academic university or a team of PhDs can begin to undertake cross-comparative studies between near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFO contact experiences, remote viewing, remote viewer experiencers, the channelers, people that have seen ghosts and spirits, interacted with ghosts and spirits, people that have interacted with orbs, for example, and be able to put all of that in a big, gigantic pot and mix them and stir them around and be able to find out what are the similarities, what are the differences, what are the commonalities. And that is what needs to be done in terms of from a research perspective. Now, in terms of the relationship between consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence, okay, all of these individuals that I described to you earlier, the parapsychologists, numerous of the physicists that Edgar worked with, Edgar Mitchell, all of these geniuses hypothesize that all of these contact modalities are interrelated, and that the key to understand it is non-local aspects of consciousness. That means that whatever is happening to us is not a result of our brain, okay? It's something outside of our brain. It's a total non-materialist aspect of viewing our reality, and in viewing the relationship of us as human beings with our reality. Quantum physics provides a key to all of this because the concepts of the double slit experiment, of entanglement, which I won't go into too much details, but basically these are theories and experiments that begin to explain how our consciousness interacts with some abstract aspect of quantum physics to initiate changes to our reality. Let me just briefly state in the entanglement, the double slit experiment. I'd rather not. That's going to be quite detailed and quite lengthy. But you could look it up for yourself on the website and read up about it. So what Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness and other theories, similar theories, like Dr. Claude Swanson, who's a member of our free board of director, he has a PhD in physics from Princeton University. He wrote a book approximately 20 years ago titled The Synchronized Universe. Also, David Bohm's theories were captured by Michael Talbot in The Holographic Universe, a classic book that everyone needs to read. That describes many of these concepts that I've just presented. So that's a must reading for everyone. Michael Talbot, The Holographic Universe. Then there's another book titled The Field by Lynn McTaggart. The Field, another must read. If there's any two must reads to give you a foundation for what I'm talking about, is those two books. And in those two books, basically, they lay out the foundation for non-local consciousness and how non-local consciousness is important to be able to understand the true nature of our reality. So what we have now is non-local consciousness, the cosmology of our reality, and then we have the contact modalities, which involves non-human intelligence. So what we're trying to understand, and not everyone is clueless to this, is how are both interrelated. Okay, how does the cosmology of our reality interact with this whole aspect of non-human intelligence? In volume 2 of our book, Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Non-Human Intelligence, Volume 2 is going to be a theoretical book. It's going to be having various articles that are going to be talking about these two concepts that up until our research, no one has ever tried to put them together. Okay, what we're trying to get at eventually is people have heard of a unified theory of physics, because quantum physics and Einstein's relativity theory, when you try to combine them, they don't mesh. They're like many ways total opposites, polar opposites. So a lot of scientists have been trying to come out for many, many years with a unified theory of physics. What we think is the key for the work that we're doing, the work of inner space and outer space that Edgar had alluded to, is can we come up with a unified theory of consciousness, our reality, and non-human intelligence? Okay, how is consciousness, how we react with the very fabric of our reality, how does that interrelate with this whole aspect of non-human intelligence? Now, one topic that again is very, very controversial, and that gets back to the spiritual transformation, the spiritual aspects of all of this, is we have a chapter in our book that's focused on the spiritual transformation of these individuals, and that was written by Reverend Michael Carter and Mike Marburg. 95% of the people that took our surveys believe that somehow this non-human intelligence that they are interacting with is somehow related to the spirit world, that it's related to past lives and after we die, okay, and the spirit world. Many of them believe that 30% of them were actually told by non-human intelligence of this relationship. Approximately 35% were brought by non-human intelligence to the spirit world. And this is independent of the folks that had near-death experiences. Okay, like I was brought to that matrix reality. Many of these individuals were brought to this other reality, like Jodie Foster's book Contact. Okay, so it's that whole interconnection between the spirit world, between life after death, reincarnation, past lives, and missions that we have here, missions to learn. These are all, questions that were raised by our data. We don't have any answers, but these are topics that need to be pursued in our future. I personally view the intelligence that's been interacting with me as modern angels, not in a biblical religious sense, but in terms of, as Jacques Vallée have stated, as Alan Hynek has stated, as John Mack has stated, together with all of our members of our free board of directors, that this intelligence is able to manipulate time and space. Okay, and that leads to the hypothesis that we're dealing with a multi-dimensional non-human intelligence, not necessarily with a physical ET, okay, but we are also dealing with multi-dimensional non-human intelligence, and that reverts back to this whole hypothesis of the spirit world and who we really are.
Beautiful. I could have let you go on and on. That was an amazing summation. And as always, Ray, thank you so, so much. You brought us to a place of deep contemplation. The mystery, of course, gets deeper. But the fact that Free has really grasped the implications of what we're looking at here, it seems, through this interrelationship, you, I think, are really helping us on our way to perhaps solving the mystery. And I have a feeling that whomever and whatever we are connected to is looking for us to discover that for ourselves. So my hat's off to you, to the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, to Dr. Rudy Shield, to Mary Rodwell, and all of the friends of Free. I count myself among them, by the way.
Most definitely.
I want to thank you so, so much. Let me say to everyone out there who has any interest in the broad, complex, and certainly paradigm-changing subject that we call the ET UFO, or as we'll say here for the purposes of this conversation, NHI/UAP phenomenon, you must get this book. You must get this book, which, as I mentioned, maybe number one at this point. I have a feeling it's going to hit number one in the category of UFOs. Go get it. Tell us briefly, Ray, in our closing moments, where people can learn more about the work of Free and where you and other members of Free are going to be speaking.
Okay. First of all, our book, Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence, is available on Amazon. You can learn more about the Free organization. We have two websites. One website is consciousnessandcontact.org. Consciousnessandcontact.org. And our older website is experiencer.org. Experiencer.org. We also have a Facebook site for experiencers to communicate with each other, and that's Consciousness and Contact. Consciousness and Contact. That's on Facebook. And our email is info@experiencer.org. info@experiencer.org. And if you send us a request, we will send you chapter 1, which is almost 160 pages of chapter 1 and the prelude of Dr. Rudy Shields. We will also send you the table of contents so you could review it. And that's our main chapter. That's the most important chapter there. And if you like it, then you could purchase our book. So once again, send us an email at info@experiencer.org, and we will send out chapter 1.
Excellent. Okay. We also have another little surprise coming out. Can we get into that about the preface?
About the what now?
The preface, your preface that you wrote.
Oh, yes, please.
No, you can talk about it.
Well, I have a preface to our book where I detail a little bit about my experiences. I normally I didn't want to put it in our book, but I thought it was important to provide the context of how Free got started, which is that story that I told you a short while ago. And you found it very important to be able to articulate that story, and you did an audio of it, and it was unbelievable. I was blown away but by the audio version of it, and it seems like a little mini Kindle, and right now we're putting some video attaching to that, but it was a quality professional job that you did. It truly blew me away.
Well, you wrote something that blew me away, and that's why I said let's see if we can get that out there. So stand by for that, everyone. And that's actually a legitimate chapter in and of itself. That was about a 40-minute listen. So we will have that, of course, on our YouTube channel. And it was my pleasure and honor to try to help out in any way I could. So stay tuned for that, everyone. Well, listen, Rey Hernandez. Oh my God, this is the third time I believe you have been on the show. We did one filmed interview. I think it's been 2 years now, maybe even a little longer. And then our initial interview sometime before that. But I've got to tell you, this one really takes the cake for me. I hope our audience enjoys hearing what you have to say. You are a walking encyclopedia. And now there's an encyclopedia that you can have on your coffee table because this sucker is big, I got to tell you. But it's one of those things where, I have a feeling it's one of those rare books that, it's something that looks like a textbook, but I think it reads like a journey as well as, so it can be used as something that you could just take your time and read through, or go in and pluck out areas that as you see fit. A reference that deserves to be in everyone's library who has an interest in this subject. So again, I want to congratulate you, everyone at Free, and all the contributors that contributed to this amazing piece of work. So, Rey Hernandez from Free. Go ahead. Last word.
What I was going to say, Alexis, is that I'll be at several upcoming conferences. Yeah. The first one is October, I believe, is 3, 4, or 5 at Portals to Ascension in Irvine, California. Mm-hmm. I then will be speaking at UPARS and MUFON, LA, the following week. And then we were just invited to speak at the Ozark Mountain UFO Conference, and that is in April of 2019. And in May of 2019, we were just invited, Rudy, Mary, and I, to Contact in the Desert. And that will be the very first time that the three co-founders of Free will be together at the same time.
Excellent.
So I'm looking forward to that.
I am too, and we're already talking about perhaps doing something together when out at Contact in the Desert. So stay tuned for that. So exciting. You're really making some headway, man. the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters. And by the way, I memorized that now. remember, I think the first time I interviewed you, I have to tell you guys, we had to take a few takes because the name is so long, it just escaped me, but it is now indelibly imprinted in my mind.
Yeah. Well, what? Sorry to bust the bubble there, but it's extraordinary experiences.
Did I say? Oh, okay. Oh well, I got to take those bragging rights away now.
You got to take it back.
Free. It's free. I love it.
It's free. Correct.
Thank you, Rey Hernandez. I appreciate you as always. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning in to Higher Journeys. We'll talk to you soon.